Madison, I'm pregnant, and I need you to come home. Forever. The words sliced through the static hum of the office like shattered glass, sending a chill down my spine that no San Francisco breeze ever could. My mother's voice, trembling, yet carrying that sharp edge I'd come to dread. It felt like the walls of my sleek downtown office were suddenly closing in, squeezing the air out of my lungs. One sentence, and it was as if years of carefully built distance between me and Savannah, Georgia, dissolved in an instant. I gripped the phone tighter, staring out the window where the city sparkled under the late-night lights, pretending that somehow the view could anchor me. But my pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the muted conversations of my coworkers packing up for the night. My name is Madison Clark. I'm 35. A senior UX designer living in San Francisco, a place where the fog rolls in off the bay and freedom tastes like sea salt and coffee. I've carved out a life I love, clean lines, independence, my own rules. I'm the woman who decides when to wake up, when to work, when to chase down creative sparks until 3 a.m, and when to close my door and shut the world out. Except my family doesn't believe in doors, especially my mother, Patricia, who seems to think my life choices are written in pencil, hers to erase and redraw at will, and my father, James, who's convinced family loyalty should override any personal dream. Then there's my younger sister, Rachel, who's always floated through life like confetti in the wind, bright, beautiful, reckless, trusting someone else would sweep up the mess. As kids, I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the fixer. While Rachel skipped dance classes and sleepovers, I stayed home making dinner. While she snuck out, I covered for her, lying awake until I heard her tiptoe back in. My parents called me a natural caretaker, but nothing about it felt natural. I earned every bit of my independence with sleepless nights, double shifts, and a relentless voice inside whispering, "There's more for you than this." So I'd left Savannah behind. The magnolia-scented streets, the white-pillared houses, the expectations that clung to my skin like humidity. Until tonight, until my mother's voice pulled me back across state lines and years of silence, with 8 words that threatened to unravel everything I'd fought so hard to build. And deep down, a part of me already knew. This wasn't just a call for help. It was the opening move in a game my family has been playing my whole life. My childhood wasn't a storybook, though from the outside, anyone passing our white-columned house on Liberty Street would have sworn it was perfection. Our front porch wrapped around like a southern embrace, framed by hanging ferns and the sweet hush of Spanish moss swaying overhead. Neighbors waved and smiled, believing the Clarks were the picture of grace and harmony. But behind that pristine door, my family was a kingdom and I was its loyal soldier. From the time I could reach the countertop, I was tasked with stirring sauces, folding laundry, memorizing polite scripts to recite for company, while other girls in Savannah played hopscotch on chalk-lined sidewalks. I was vacuuming rugs before guests arrived. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, suds up to my wrists, watching Rachel twirl in the backyard sunlight. Her hair shimmered gold, her laughter rising like music, while I calculated how many minutes I had left before I'd be called to chop vegetables. Patricia, my mother, used to say, "Madison, you're just better at responsibility. It's who you are." But it wasn't who I was. It was who I had to become. Because in our house, mistakes weren't gently corrected. They were cataloged, analyzed, used as cautionary tales. If Rachel stayed out past curfew, my parents said, "She's just young, finding her way." But when I came home 10 minutes late, my father's voice would tighten as he hissed, "You're setting a bad example." I learned early that being the good one earned fewer punishments and sometimes fleeting praise. But it also meant swallowing my needs whole. When my friends invited me for weekend sleepovers, I'd lie and say I had too much homework. The truth was, my mother needed help preparing for Sunday lunch. My father demanded everything look effortless. Neighbors couldn't know if money was tight, or if Rachel was slipping her grades. And definitely no one could suspect that sometimes. At dinner, silence fell so heavy I could hear the ice melting in our sweet tea glasses. Even as a teenager, the pattern didn't break. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, worked evenings at a little bookstore off Broughton Street, saved every dollar in a battered envelope hidden beneath my mattress. College was my only escape route. At night, lying in my bed, I'd stare at the plaster ceiling and whisper to myself, 4 more years. Just 4 more years. Meanwhile, Rachel drifted through hobbies like leaves in a tide ballet, photography, equestrian lessons. Each time she lost interest, my parents shrugged. She's creative, they'd say, signing another check. On my 17th birthday, my mother handed me a slim box. Inside was a leather planner and a silver pen. For organizing your future, she said. For Rachel's 17th, a gold charm bracelet, sparkling with tiny hearts. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching that planner, fighting back tears. Because deep down, I knew my parents didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a solution, a built-in safety net for the family, the one who'd always say yes. Even if it meant saying no to myself, I didn't want to hate them for it. But resentment had a way of burrowing beneath my ribs, sharp as barbed wire. So when I finally got my acceptance letter to UC Berkeley, 3,000 miles from Savannah, I felt like I'd won my freedom. Or so I thought. Because no matter how far you run, family always knows how to find you. It was nearly 9 o'clock when my phone started buzzing across my desk. The screen lighting up with Mom. I stared at it like it might bite me. Because the last time we'd spoken, she'd accused me of choosing strangers over my own blood, just because I'd spent Christmas skiing in Tahoe instead of flying home to Georgia. A part of me wanted to let the call slip into voicemail. But guilt, that old familiar chokehold, wrapped around my throat. So I picked up, "Madison, sweetie, we need you to come home this weekend." Her voice trembled, but beneath it ran a steely current I knew all too well. I forced my own voice to stay even. "Why? What's happened?" "It's about Rachel." Of course it was. I shut my eyes, leaning back in my chair, feeling the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. She's pregnant," my mother said, words spilling out in a whisper. 4 months along. The father, he left. Just disappeared. My chest tightened so fast it hurt. My sister, pregnant, abandoned. I tried to picture it, Rachel, with her endless supply of hair products and yoga pants, suddenly preparing for diapers and midnight feedings. It didn't fit, but I could practically hear my parents already spinning the narrative their perfect family, cracked open for the neighbors to see. I swallowed. "And what do you want from me, Mom?" Her pause was telling. "Just come home for the weekend. We need to talk about the future as a family." Family. That word felt like a leash snapping around my neck. I rubbed my temples. "Mom, I have work, deadlines, client meetings. You've always found a way to make time before," she said, her voice going soft and sad. "This is family, Madison." It was the same script she'd used my entire life. When I wanted to go away for summer camp, family comes first. When I wanted to stay out with friends, family comes first. When I took the job in San Francisco, how could you choose strangers over family? I glanced out at the city. Neon reflections glimmered in the office windows across the street. It all felt impossibly far away from magnolia trees and front porches. But my mother's voice pulled me back like a rip current. "Please, Madison, your sister needs you." And God help me. Part of me still wanted to be the daughter who showed up. "Okay," I said, each word heavy as stone. "I'll come home for the weekend." The relief in her voice was instant. Wonderful. "We'll see you Friday." She hung up before I could change my mind. I dropped my phone on the desk and sat there, staring at my own reflection in the glass partition. 35 years old, professional, independent, and still caught in the same undertow I'd been fighting my whole life. I knew exactly how this would go. They'd talk about how temporary the situation was, how Rachel just needed a little help. But my parents didn't believe in temporary. They believed in permanent solutions. And the permanent solution was me, when I finally left the office that night. San Francisco's wind slapped at my cheeks, sharp and cold. I hugged my coat tighter around me, repeating over and over, "It's just one weekend. Just one." But my stomach twisted with dread. Because I'd learned the hard way. In my family, just one weekend could stretch into forever. The drive from San Francisco to Savannah felt longer than the miles on the map. I watched the flat highways unravel beneath my tires, my mind churning with rehearsed boundaries I'd promised myself I'd hold. I can't do that, but here's what I can offer. That doesn't work for me. Over and over, like a mantra. I reached the outskirts of Savannah as twilight spilled peach and gold across the marshes. Spanish moss hung from the trees, waving softly, like fingers beckoning me closer or warning me away. My parents' house gleamed under a fresh coat of white paint, shutters glossy navy blue, flower beds exploding with hydrangeas. Picture perfect. Exactly how they wanted it. I barely had the car in park before my mother burst out the front door, arms wide. "You're here," she cried, voice bubbling over with false brightness. "We've been waiting all day." She hugged me so tightly my breath caught, then pulled back to hold me at arm's length, studying me like a prize returned from auction. My father, James, appeared behind her. He gave me a brisk one-armed hug, then took my suitcase from the trunk. "Good to see you, kiddo. Come inside, dinner's almost ready." The moment I stepped through the front door, the scent of cinnamon potpourri slammed into me like a time machine. Same walls, same antique furniture, same gleaming hardwood floors that echoed with every step. But something felt off. Rachel was sprawled on the living room couch, a soft baby bump visible beneath a loose floral top, remote in hand. "Hey, Mads," she said lazily, not even bothering to stand. "Good timing. I'm starving." It was as if I'd just popped out to the store, not spent months and miles apart. I swallowed my irritation and forced a smile. "Hi, Rach." Dinner smelled like roast chicken and buttered green beans. My mother fluttered around the table, dropping little remarks about the neighbors, the weather, the local pastor's new sermon. All normal, except for the undercurrent of tension winding tighter with every forkful. When dessert arrived, homemade pecan pie, my father finally cleared his throat. "So, Madison, your mother and I have been talking." "Here it comes." He cut his pie into tiny, precise bites, not looking up. "About the family situation, Rachel's pregnancy." "You mean," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. My mother gave me a look like I'd just shouted obscenities in church. "It's about the whole situation. Rachel, the baby, and the house." A chill swept through me. "What about the house?" Patricia and James exchanged a glance, the kind of look that meant decisions had already been made. "Well," my mother said brightly, "we've been thinking it makes sense for you to move home. At least for a while." It felt like someone dropped ice water down my spine. "Move home from San Francisco." My father waved a hand. "Your computer job. You can do that from anywhere these days." My pulse spiked. My computer job is a senior position. I have clients, team meetings. Rachel groaned. "It's not like you're saving lives, Madison." I stared at her. "This is my career. Rachel, my life." My mother leaned closer, her voice soft. Family needs to come together in times like these. I'm happy to help, but moving back isn't practical or necessary, I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. My father's mouth flattened into a thin line. We'll see. I felt my chest tighten, panic clawing at the edges. Let's show you upstairs, my mother said quickly. Standing so abruptly, her chair scraped across the floor. They shepherded me up the familiar staircase. But when I turned into what used to be my bedroom, I froze. Gone was my wrought iron bed, my battered desk where I'd written college essays by lamplight. In its place stood a pristine nursery, pale gray walls, white furniture, a rocking chair in the corner. A white crib sat exactly where my bed used to be. My mother clasped her hands together. Isn't it, darling? We thought soft neutrals would be perfect. My voice came out a strangled whisper. Where am I supposed to sleep this weekend? Oh, we've set up the pull-out in the den, my mother chirped, as if offering a suite at the Ritz. It's quite comfortable. I turned to Rachel, who was lingering in the doorway, arms folded. So where was I supposed to sleep if I moved back permanently? Silence. Finally, my mother said, too brightly, the den would be yours. We can fix it up nicely. I blinked. The den was a glorified closet, no door, wedged next to the kitchen, where the smell of frying bacon would wake me up every morning. In that moment, it all crystallized. They hadn't asked me to visit. They'd been preparing for me to return permanently. My independence wasn't just inconvenient to them. It was an obstacle they fully intended to remove. That night, I lay on the pull-out sofa in the den, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles. It squeaked every few seconds, like a metronome counting down the moments until my life would cease to belong to me. I'd come home for one weekend, but I could feel the trap closing around me. The next morning, I was jolted awake at 6:30 by my mother tapping gently at the den's frame. There wasn't even a door. Madison, Rachel's not feeling well. She needs company. By the time I shuffled to the kitchen, Rachel was already perched on a stool, looking dramatically miserable. I barely slept, she whined, cradling her stomach. Can you make me some toast? Maybe with cinnamon sugar? I opened my mouth to say no, but the words wouldn't come out. So I made her toast. That became the rhythm of my days. Rachel texted me from her bedroom, demanding snacks, Netflix recommendations, help choosing baby clothes online. Whenever I tried to explain that I was working because somehow I was still trying to keep up my job remotely, she pouted or cried. She's being so cold. She complained to our parents one afternoon. She doesn't even act like my sister anymore. That's all it took. By dinner that evening, my father was glaring at me over meatloaf. You need to get your priorities straight. Family comes first. And my mother chimed in, voice trembling. We sacrificed so much for you, Madison. Now it's your turn. Every time I tried to leave, something urgent came up. Rachel needed to be driven to a doctor's appointment. My father wanted help organizing the family's financial paperwork. My mother couldn't figure out how to reset her email password. Individually, each request felt small, but together, they formed invisible bars around me. The first real crack in my resolve came when I noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number in San Francisco. When I returned the call, a woman's voice answered, cautious and polite. Hi. Madison, I'm following up about the apartment viewings you canceled. My pulse skidded sideways. I never canceled any viewings. There was a pause. Your mother said you'd decided to stay in Georgia permanently, so she was helping tidy up your affairs. My jaw went slack. I hung up and stormed into the kitchen, where my mother was folding dish towels. Did you call my real estate agent? She blinked innocently. I was trying to help. Sweetie, you're so busy. Besides, it seems premature to look for new places when we haven't settled the family plan. The family plan. I exploded. My life is not a family plan. My father appeared in the doorway, his expression granite hard. Lower your voice. We're trying to have a civilized discussion." Rachel slunk in behind him, arms crossed. "It's not like you have anything that important in San Francisco," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're just making pictures on a computer." My voice cracked. "Those pictures pay for my life, Rachel." But none of them seemed to hear me. And it wasn't just the apartment. My laptop mysteriously accidentally got drenched when my mother placed a vase too close to my workspace. "It's just a laptop," she said, waving off my panic. "We'll get you another one." But the replacement took over a week. During that time, I was forced to use the old family desktop computer set up in the living room, where everyone could hover and watch. Privacy gone. Meanwhile, my mother started calling my friends back in San Francisco. "Oh, Madison's too busy to talk right now," she'd say sweetly. "She's helping her sister. You understand? Family comes first." It wasn't until my friend Allison called me in a panic that I realized my mother had been screening my calls, cutting off the people who might help me leave. "You're scaring us." "Madison," Allison said, "it's like you've disappeared. And maybe I had, piece by piece, until I was a ghost in my own life, trapped in a place that smelled like cinnamon and expectations." One night, after everyone else went to bed, I crept into the hallway to fetch my phone charger. I passed my parents' bedroom and heard their voices through the door. "Once the paperwork's in place, she won't be able to leave," my father said. "Is that even legal?" Rachel's voice whispered, anxious. My mother's tone was soft, conspiratorial. "It's a family care contract. Rachel, perfectly legitimate. Once Madison signs, she'll be the baby's official caregiver. That way, everyone's protected." The words slammed into me so hard I almost staggered. They weren't just hoping I'd help. They were building a legal cage around my life. Because to my family, I wasn't Madison Clark. I was a solution, a resource, a safety net they were determined to keep at any cost. A week later, the baby shower arrived like a pink hurricane. My mother transformed the house into a shrine of pastel balloons and tissue paper pom-poms. Plates of tiny sandwiches sat next to towers of cupcakes. Glittery signs announced, "It's a girl." I helped set out the punch bowl, hands trembling with exhaustion, because by then, I'd been home 3 weeks, not one, and each day felt like it dragged me deeper into quicksand. Family and neighbors poured in, kissing Rachel's cheeks, squealing over ultrasound photos. Rachel sat on an armchair like a queen, one hand resting dramatically on her baby bump. I tried to stay invisible, keeping busy passing around plates, scribbling names for thank you notes. But during the gift opening, my Aunt Lillian, who smelled like rose perfume and judgment, leaned over and said, "So, Madison, when do you officially move back?" My stomach lurched. "Move back, I'm not." Before I could finish, my mother clapped her hands for attention. "Everyone, before we open the last gifts, we have a special announcement." I froze, a ladle of punch midair. My mother beamed. "Madison has decided she's moving home permanently to help raise Rachel's baby." A sharp, collective gasp rippled through the room. Then applause erupted. Aunt Lillian wiped a tear. Family sacrifices, that's real love. I stood there, pulse pounding, punch dripping onto the tablecloth. Rachel beamed. "Isn't it amazing I won't have to do this alone?" Neighbors started peppering me with questions. "So, are you transferring your job here? Are you buying a house in Savannah? How wonderful of you to give up your career." My lips parted, but nothing came out. It felt like the room was shrinking around me, full of smiling faces who had no idea they were applauding my imprisonment. Finally, I heard my own voice, shaking. "I haven't agreed to anything permanent." Silence fell, so sharp it made my ears ring. My mother laughed too brightly. "Oh, don't listen to her modesty. Madison's already given notice at her apartment and arranged remote work indefinitely. She's just being humble." My hands curled into fists. "I haven't given notice anywhere. And my remote arrangement is temporary." Rachel's face crumpled, eyes shimmering with tears. "Why are you embarrassing Mom in front of everyone?" The room held its breath. My mother's smile flattened into something brittle. "Well, we'll talk about this later." The rest of the shower felt like moving through molasses. People whispered. Eyebrows shot up. I plastered on a smile as I cleared away gift wrap and stacked plastic plates. Rage and humiliation boiling beneath my skin. After the guests finally left, my mother was silent while loading the dishwasher until she spun around, face blazing. "How could you contradict me in front of everyone?" I slammed a plate onto the counter. "How could you announce decisions for my life that I never made?" My father appeared in the doorway. "It's what needs to happen. Madison, your sister can't do this alone." "It's not my responsibility," I shouted. Rachel stomped into the kitchen, eyes red. "So my baby is just an inconvenience to you." My voice dropped low and deadly. "Your baby is yours, Rachel, not mine." My mother clasped her hands over her chest like I'd struck her. "We raised you better than this selfishness." My father's voice was pure ice. "We've made sacrifices for your entire life. Now it's your turn." The word sacrifice crackled in the air like static. I felt my body trembling, my breath coming too fast, because I could finally see the truth I'd tried so hard not to face. My parents had never seen my independence as success. They'd seen it as a temporary detour, until they needed me to step back into the role they'd assigned me since childhood. And the part that twisted my gut the hardest was that they'd been planning it behind my back for months. Later that night, while searching for my phone charger in my father's office, I opened a drawer and found a thick manila folder labeled Care Agreement. I flipped it open and my blood ran cold. It spelled out terms for me to become Rachel's child's official caregiver, with stipulations about income contributions, housing, and even legal guardianship rights. My name was typed in every clause. Tears burned my eyes as I read the fine print. They weren't just hoping I'd stay. They were trying to chain me here, legally, financially, emotionally. Because to them, I wasn't a person with my own life. I was the insurance policy for the family's future. That night, I lay in the dark on the lumpy pull-out couch, my pulse roaring in my ears like the ocean in a storm. The manila folder sat on the coffee table, its edges poking out like sharp little knives. I couldn't unsee those words. Care agreement, legal guardianship. My name spelled out like property. A cold electric clarity sliced through me. I had to get out. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. I rose quietly and slipped my laptop from beneath the coffee table, hunching low to keep the screen hidden from the hallway. My fingers trembled as I typed an email to my boss. Patrick. Subject line, urgent, personal situation. I poured out the truth, or at least enough of it. The manipulation, the pressure to stay, the documents I'd discovered. "I don't want to lose my job," I wrote, "but I can't stay here any longer." When I hit send, a strange calm washed over me, because I finally realized I wasn't a scared teenager anymore. I was a grown woman, and I was done being the family's backup plan. At dawn, I showered and dressed like it was any other day. I padded into the kitchen where my mother was already humming over a skillet, flipping bacon. "Good morning, sweetie," she said. "Did you sleep well?" "Great." I lied smoothly. "Hey, I need to run some errands this afternoon. Office supplies, a few groceries, might take a couple of hours." Her eyes narrowed just for a second. Then she forced a smile. "Of course. Will you be back for dinner? Wouldn't miss it." Inside, my stomach twisted at the lie. After breakfast, I slipped into my father's office again, carefully retrieving my passport, birth certificate, and the slim blue leather folder that held my professional portfolio. Items my parents would absolutely try to use to keep me tethered. I zipped them into my tote bag and strolled out the front door, waving as my mother called after me to remember the cinnamon coffee creamer for Rachel. Once I was out of sight of the house, I dropped into my car and sped toward downtown Savannah. First stop, a bank I'd researched online at 3 a.m. I opened a brand new account at a nationwide chain with no local Savannah branches. I transferred nearly all my savings out of my primary accounts, leaving just enough so my parents wouldn't suspect anything. Yet. The bank teller, a woman named Jasmine with bright pink nails, gave me a curious look. Big move happening. I smiled faintly. You could say that. My next stop was a small electronics store where I bought a prepaid cell phone cash only and loaded it with a new number no one in my family knew. Then I drove across town to a storage facility where I signed a short-term lease on a small unit and stashed the essentials I'd quietly gathered: my grandmother's jewelry, my backup hard drives, irreplaceable sketchbooks from my career. Every step felt like I was stitching a lifeline back to myself. My final call was to my college roommate, Sophie, who lived in Austin, Texas. When she picked up, I whispered, "I need a place to crash." Quietly, her voice turned fierce. "Say no more. Get here as soon as you can." I blinked hard, trying not to cry. "Thank you. I'm leaving tomorrow morning." By the time I pulled back into my parents' driveway that evening, the sky was deep purple, the cicadas singing so loud they drowned out my racing thoughts. My mother greeted me at the door. "Did you get the creamer?" "Of course," I said, smiling as I held up the grocery bag. Inside, I pretended everything was normal, helping Rachel look at baby names on Pinterest, laughing at my father's stories about his golf league. But behind my smile, my mind was miles away, plotting every detail, because I knew one truth as clear as the Georgia stars blazing overhead. If I stayed, I'd lose myself, and I refused to become the footnote in my own life. At dawn, I loaded my tote bag into the trunk of my car, heart hammering so hard it shook my ribs. I glanced back once at the white-pillared house where I'd spent half my life trying to be who they wanted. Then I whispered, "Goodbye," and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Instead of heading toward the bakery like I'd told my mother, I steered my car straight for the interstate, tires humming on sunlit pavement, Georgia shrinking behind me with every mile. 10 hours later, I pulled into Sophie's apartment complex in Austin, Texas. She was waiting in the parking lot, arms open wide, her hair pulled into a messy top knot. I barely made it out of the car before I started sobbing, my voice breaking with weeks of fear and exhaustion. Sophie wrapped me up in a hug so tight I could finally breathe. "Madison," she whispered, "you're safe now, and you're not alone." I slept 14 hours straight that night. The next morning, my phone pinged my boss, Patrick, replying to the email I'd sent in Savannah. His message simply said, "Madison, you have options. We're opening a satellite office in Denver. Would you consider relocating full support? We'll help you get set up." I stared at the screen, my throat closing with gratitude. Denver, a place my family would never think to look. I typed back one word, "Yes." Within days, Patrick and HR had arranged temporary housing, helping me keep my new address private. By the end of the week, I was on a flight heading west, feeling the weight of the past lifting a fraction with every mile of cloud beneath me. But my freedom came with consequences. A week after arriving in Denver, I opened an email from my father. "We're worried sick about your mental health. Abandoning your family shows a serious break from reality. Come home. We'll help you get treatment." I felt sick reading it. Not once did it say, "Are you safe? Are you happy?" It was all about control, about fear, about dragging me back into the orbit I'd just escaped. I forwarded the email to my new attorney, a fierce woman named Angela, who specialized in family law. Angela called me 5 minutes later. "This is harassment. Madison, we're going to send them a cease and desist letter. We'll make it very clear any further attempts to interfere with your life will result in legal consequences." And so we did. We documented everything: calls, emails, Facebook posts suggesting I'd had a mental breakdown, screenshots, voicemails, witness statements. Angela drafted a letter so sharp it practically bled ink. A week after it was delivered, my parents' frantic calls slowed. The posts vanished from social media. For the first time, I realized my freedom didn't just depend on running away. It depended on fighting back. Denver welcomed me with snow-capped peaks, bright sun, and the crisp smell of pine that felt like possibility. I started showing up at the office again, my colleagues treating me like any other designer, not a woman who'd fled the wreckage of her own family. I bought a new phone, rented a small apartment under a corporate lease, my name hidden from public records. Every day I woke up to skies so wide they made me feel small and free. And though my parents still tried, now and then, to claw me back, I'd learned how to say no, and mean it. Denver felt like a city made for starting over. Cold, clean air, mountains standing guard on the horizon, and strangers who didn't know my name, or my past, or the shape of the chains I'd broken. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't Madison the dutiful daughter, Madison the fixer, Madison the safety net. I was just Madison, and God, it was terrifying. The first few weeks, I kept my head down, pouring my energy into work, determined to prove to Patrick and maybe to myself that I wasn't damaged goods. But the silence of my new apartment pressed in at night. No baby cries, no family voices outside my door, just the gentle hum of the city drifting up from the streets below. So I forced myself out. I signed up for a cooking class on Tuesday nights. I joined a hiking group that met at dawn to watch the sunrise over red rocks. And slowly, almost without noticing, I started to breathe easier. One Saturday, at a coffee shop on Colfax, I bumped into a man as we both reached for the same scone. He laughed, handing it over. "Ladies first!" His name was Connor, a software developer from Seattle, newly transferred to Denver for work. Tall, sandy hair, shy smile. Nothing like the manipulative, suffocating dynamic I'd grown up with. He didn't press when I told him I was new in town. Didn't ask why. Just nodded like that made perfect sense. Over the next weeks, we started seeing each other coffee runs, impromptu dinners, lazy Sunday mornings, wandering farmers' markets. He asked questions gently, but never pushed for answers I wasn't ready to give. And somewhere in those simple moments, I realized how starved I'd been for connection without conditions. In Denver, I also started therapy. Dr. Kim, soft-spoken, fierce-eyed, sat across from me in a small office lined with mountain photographs. "It sounds like your family trained you to believe love is earned by sacrifice," she said one afternoon. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. They made me feel like saying no was the worst betrayal imaginable. She nodded. "That's not love, Madison. That's control. Real love respects boundaries. Real love doesn't require you to disappear." Her words sank into me like warm sunlight on frozen ground. I went home that day and wrote in my journal for hours, pouring out memories I'd buried so deep I barely recognized them. And one night, I sat across from Connor, fingers twined around my coffee mug, and told him the truth. All of it. About Savannah, Rachel, the baby, the contracts, the way my family tried to carve me up into pieces they could keep. When I finished, my breath caught, waiting for him to pull away. Instead, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said softly, "Madison, you deserve a life that's yours. No judgment, no pity, just quiet understanding." For the first time in years, I believed him. I began to see that surviving wasn't the same as living. That happiness wasn't selfish. That freedom was more than distance. It was choosing who I let into my world and who I didn't. And in the quiet Denver evenings, with city lights twinkling outside my window, I realized something else. The person I'd become through all the chaos, she was strong, and she wasn't going anywhere. One year after I drove away from Savannah, I stood on the balcony of my Denver apartment, looking out at a sky streaked in pink and orange. A cool breeze rolled over the city, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not perfect, not unscarred, but real. Sometimes, late at night, my phone still lights up with messages from my parents. Some are gentle, some are manipulative. I've learned how to tell the difference, and how to ignore the ones that would drag me back into chains. I've kept in touch with Rachel, too, carefully, at arm's length. A few months ago, she called me unexpectedly. "Madison, being a mom is harder than I thought," she whispered, her voice raw. "I think I finally get why you had to go." I closed my eyes, breathing deep. "That means more than you know," I told her. "She's trying, in her own way, but I'm not her savior anymore. And I never will be again. Here's the truth I've learned. Family can be beautiful, but family is not an excuse to break your spirit. Love isn't proven by how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice. It's proven by how you show up for people and how they show up for you without expecting you to vanish in the process. If you're listening to this right now and recognizing pieces of yourself in my story, I want you to know something. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. Saying no doesn't mean you're selfish. It means you understand that your life, your dreams, your peace matter just as much as anyone else's. And if someone calls you selfish for wanting your own life, that's not love talking. That's fear. I've learned to watch for certain signs, the ones I wish I'd seen sooner. When someone makes your worth conditional on what you can do for them, when guilt becomes the currency of every conversation, when your success feels like a threat instead of a reason for celebration, when love feels more like a job description than a choice. If any of that sounds familiar, please listen to me. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to choose yourself. And choosing yourself might be the single most loving thing you can do, not just for you, but for everyone involved. Because living a life out of obligation isn't love. It's a prison. In Denver, I've built new traditions. Weekend hikes into the Rockies, cooking dinner with friends, quiet evenings curled up with a sketchbook and music playing low. And Connor, he's still here. Sometimes we walk through snowy streets, our breath hanging in the cold, and I catch him looking at me like he's memorizing my face. When I ask him why, he just shrugs and says, "Because you look free." And he's right, because I am. If you've ever stood at the edge between the life you've built and the life others want from you, I hope you remember this. Your freedom doesn't need anyone's permission. Your dreams are not negotiable, and your life is worth fighting for. Always.